Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Smitty's Gunsmithing. Today we're going to be talking again, this will be an update video on the Sig P320 family of firearms. It's been some more events happened over the week since my last video, and I've done some more testing since my last video, and we're going to go over some things that I thought about after doing the last video to check out, and we're going to kind of go through. I've got the actual FBI report here from their evaluation of the Michigan State Police's Sig Sauer M18. So we're going to go over that, and I'll look at some things they found and some things they checked and some errors I found in their report or inconsistencies. And also, since my video last week, an airman out at Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming was killed by a P320 family of pistols when he took his gun and holster off his belt and placed a holstered gun on the table or desk inside the facility where he was at, and it went off and shot him in the chest. At least that's the information we're getting. The actual investigative report hasn't been released yet, and so we don't know all the facts yet, but early information that seems to be coming out about this incident is that's what happened. Now, what I don't know is whether it happened as soon as he laid the gun down or as he was laying the gun on the desk or the table, or if it was after he laid the gun down. I don't know what all the circumstances are. It's, like I said, it's very early now, so either way, it's a tragic event and was entirely preventable, probably from a few different perspectives, but I'm not going to go into all that right now. So we're going to take a look at this, and I'll go over some more in-depth testing than my last video. And also, you're going to want to stick around to the end. This is going to be a longer video, unfortunately. There's no way I can do all this and keep it nice and short, but it's going to be a rather longer video, but you're going to want to stick around to the end for something that may surprise some of you, and also to get my take on this whole situation and my recommendations if you decide to continue carrying one of these. So to get started, looking at the FBI report, this was conducted by the Ballistic Research Facility, which is the FBI's research, development, testing, and evaluation facility for firearms, ammunition, armor, and other law enforcement items. Michigan State Police transitioned to, or began transitioning all members from Glock pistols to the Sig Sauer M18 on or about April 2024. The transition process included issuing the supporting equipment, training each member through a 1,200 round course of fire, and qualifying each member using the department's official pistol qualification course. And then, of course, on July 31st, 2024, a motor officer had his gun supposedly go off in the holster while both of his hands were occupied and were not touching the firearm. So they removed the firearm in the holster from his leg, placed it in the evidence bag, and it was transported to the FBI's Ballistic Research Facility for them to evaluate. Now, a few interesting things I think should be noted about this example. This is the only example we have of the Ballistic Research Facility by the FBI actually evaluating these handguns, all based off one incident. And then they did some testing on another gun as well they brought in. But if you look in the report and find this is notable. It's an M18 pistol with an X-flat blade trigger. Uses the fire control unit's modular system. And the FBI states that the fire control unit holds a partially pre-tensioned striker. Alright, and according to the Sig Sauer technical manual, they highlight that the P320 fire mechanism has designed safety features that prevent the pistol from firing unless the trigger is moved rearward, resulting in a deactivation of these safety features. These safety features include the striker safety lock, the captive safety lever, and the striker sear engagement on both the primary and secondary sear notch. So they brought this firearm in the holster, and FBI x-rayed it. They said that it's estimated the fire weapon had been fired 1,300 rounds before the incident took place. And let's go into the important part here. The only known modifications to the subject weapon and all MSP weapons was to the trigger. When MSP took delivery of the weapons from Sig Sauer, MSP experienced dead trigger issues. Sig Sauer determined the triggers were out of spec and ground off .020 inches with 20 thousandths. The updated triggers were largely installed by Sig Sauer. However, an MSP armorer trained in the Sig P320 platform installed the subject weapon's modified trigger. Okay, so they had a MSP armorer, and I mentioned in my first video, they had just switched to these pistols. If he was a factory trained armorer for his department and didn't have prior training or experience, that would indicate that he likely had only attended the P320 armorer course one time. So how much he knew about the platform, how experienced he was, I do not know. I'm not even going to question that because I can't say for sure. I don't know the guy, I haven't met him, but I would caution that it's likely he'd only been through an armorer's course one time. They had Glocks before, so it's possible he was probably a Glock armorer before and then went through the armorer's course one time and then started performing work on some of these weapons. What it doesn't say is what they mean by dead trigger. It also doesn't say exactly where the triggers were out of spec. So that's all stuff we do not have the answers to. And I wish they would have elaborated in the report just a little bit. But they did not. We'll get into that just a little bit more a little bit later. This is actual photographs of the firearm with the weapons light attached and the optics. They photographed it, or I'm sorry, x-rayed it, and you can still see right here in the x-ray the casing still in the chamber, the fired casing, and it's unclear to me, but it's showing the Sear engagement right here. Excuse me. My allergies are really bothering me tonight. Following the removal of the firearm and determined that the trigger had completely reset while in the holster, a coordinate measurement machine was used to scan the trigger's location prior to conducting a function test of the subject firearm. And we can see in this x-ray right here that the captive safety lever is down like it should be, so it reset. And they ultimately determined that with the coordinate measure machine that no significant change occurred, indicating that a full and proper reset of the trigger in the holster. Okay. I also have reviewed an armorer's course on this pistol since the video last week to get more familiar with everything and go over some stuff with you all. One of the issues that the FBI noted was the bottom of the face of the striker pin hook engaged with the Sear had a ledge rather than being flat. And it's kind of difficult to see right here. And they observed movement in the striker safety lock spring right here in your striker assembly or striker housing. It's only captured up here by this top leg. The bottom leg again rests on this shelf we talked about in the last video. Right here on the actual striker safety lever. It's not captured at all. But we're going to evaluate that a little bit more in depth than in the last video. They're saying that if the striker safety lock spring leg lost engagement with the top of the striker safety lock, the lock would no longer be spring loaded and could possibly seize or free float, rendering the striker safety lock inoperable. Okay. They noted excessive wear on the primary Sear surface, and they noticed an abrasion on the trigger guard, but it had the weapon had been dropped in the impact in the ground during the transition program, so they don't know if that's what caused that or not. Primary sear notch holds the striker, which is under spring tension, to the rear until the trigger is depressed. Secondary sear notch is located forward of the primary sear notch and is designed to capture the striker pin hook in the event of a sear and striker separation without the trigger being pressed. Sig recommends a replacement schedule of the sear every 20,000 rounds to prevent equipment failure before it actually occurs. Okay. The primary and secondary sear notch edges exhibit wear aligned with the striker pin hook. The face edge of each sear notch has a chipped appearance. Additionally, there appears to be a manufacturing artifact on the primary sear ramp just in front of the primary sear notch. Okay. Here is some pictures of the sear. This is wear on the primary sear notch. This is wear on the secondary sear notch. That's really looking rough right there. Okay. Striker pin hook. There's the ledge they're talking about. And it says that the striker pin hook ledge reduces the engagement surface between the primary sear notch and the striker pin face to the face of the ledge. Instead of you having this entire surface that's engaging with this buildup right here, this becomes your only engagement surface instead of the whole thing like it's supposed to, or most of it rather. Additionally, the mishapen striker pin hook face may be contributing to excessive wear on the primary and secondary sear notches. And they go over a whole lot of other stuff as far as the slide movement downward and everything. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more and hopefully show a little bit better. We can put this back together. You see we're clear. There's nothing in this firearm. Okay. Alright. I showed this in the last video, but I'm going to try to show it hopefully just a little bit better right here. Okay. Pay attention as I pull the trigger. Alright. And I'm going to move the trigger. This is difficult to do at this angle, but I'm going to move the trigger and try to do the take up right before it breaks. Okay. Look how much movement you've got in your slide. I'm sure you can hear that too. Looking at the back of the weapon. A little bit too far. Pay attention right in this area right here. That's just playing with the pre-travel of the trigger. Okay. Look at the front. Went too far. That's a lot of slide movement. I don't like it at all. Okay. If you look without pressing the trigger, that's significant slide movement. Shake the gun, you can just hear it. I don't like that. Does that necessarily make it unsafe? No, not on its own. But we're going to get into that a little bit more. So your slide, here is capture safety lever. I'm sorry, I said it back. This is your striker safety lock right here. And this is your striker. Right here is that face they're talking about that engages with the primary sear notch right here. Okay. This hook of your striker engages right there with the primary sear notch, just like that. Okay. And I mentioned that the FBI noted that it's a partially pre-tensioned striker, and I think I've read elsewhere online that it's maybe about 75 to 80% pre-tension, unlike a Glock handgun, which actually cocks the striker as you pull the trigger. I say they're wrong. And this is why I say that they're wrong. If you look right here as I squeeze this trigger, that Sear drops down. It doesn't go back like a Glock and then drop down. So a Glock moves back and actually pulls the striker back as it's being, the trigger's being pressed, and it releases a certain point and it drops down and allows the striker to go forward. So it's cocking and then releasing the striker. This doesn't move rearward, it moves down. There may be, due to the radius effect of the striker sear rather, there may be a very slight rearward movement as it drops down. But looking at it with the naked eye, it just drops down. It doesn't move backwards. And if you look at the Sig's website, The Truth About the P320, when they're defending these, according to that and their animation, it also appears it just moves straight down and doesn't come rearward. So I would argue that this is a fully tensioned striker, okay, when the gun's at rest. So one of the things that the FBI noted is the actual, I'm going to show you this outside the gun. There's your safety lever. There's that little tiny spring right there. It's a torsion spring. It's wound one time and it goes around this post right here. It's not captured on the post. The top leg is captured in a little groove right here in the striker housing. The bottom aspect of it is not captured at all. It rests right here on this inside ledge of the striker safety. Okay. I'll disassemble this. There is that little tiny spring. The short leg goes up and it indexes in that notch right up in there, and that long leg rests on the ledge of your safety block right here. Okay. If you notice, a very tiny spring fell out. That is your striker return spring, which rests on a ledge in your striker housing way down in there, and it works on this little post of your striker right here. After when the trigger's pressed, striker goes forward, it slams into your primer, and then that spring starts moving the striker back so that it withdraws out of your face of your breech right there. Okay. This is your little striker safety block right here. You can see this one's in rather good condition. And this is the portion of it right here that moves over and blocks the striker from going forward. And what it does is it engages the striker right there and stops it from going the last little bit forward, further forward, to actually protrude the breech face and engage the primer. So whenever it's in the downward position, it's holding the striker right there. When it's depressed, this moves up and allows the striker to go engage forward. Okay. I'm going to show you an easier way of putting this all back together. Put our striker in place. There we go. Put all this back in. Put it in a little hole right there on the armor block. Put your spring down and put your cups back in. Okay, hold on to them. Allow your spring to come back up over the cups and hold that in place. Now the easiest way to get this little tiny striker return spring back in is to twist your striker to the rear and twist it and engage it on the side right there. Just drop that in that notch. Let it drop down to the bottom. Rotate that again. Now it's in place. I'm going to actually move this back and engage the striker block. And we'll drop this spring in place. Very difficult to do. It's so tiny. Alright, once I got it on the post, just snap that leg in. So now our striker block safety is all the way captivated. And the way this works is that enables the striker to go all the way forward. And you can see right there, the safety's caught it, so it's not quite moving, okay? So the FBI questioned whether or not the spring could become disengaged, and I mentioned that in my last video. It appears to be captured by the slide surface itself, where it can't come out of place. As the gun is put together, there's very little space there, but you do see there is some movement left to right of the actual assembly. So what I want to do is do some testing and see if this could even be an issue. So I'm going to place my finger right there so I don't send this spring across the world. And we're going to take some calipers. .0175. So that's just over 17 thousandths, 17.5 thousandths of an inch of diameter of this spring. Okay. Put the striker housing back inside. I ordered these so I could have something narrower than my other filler gauges to get up in here. This is a 1/1000th filler gauge. My head's bumping the camera here. And what I'm trying to do is press this all the way to the right. And you can see I can get a 1/1000th filler gauge to go into the space between the striker housing and the side of the slide. Okay. But remember the width. .0175, so 17 thousandths. The closest we got is 16 thousandths. You absolutely cannot get that in that space. And that is narrower than the diameter of your spring leg right here. So no, with this assembled, your spring leg cannot come out of engagement if it slips off this post, or this ledge rather. Alright. So while it's not captured on this ledge right here of your striker safety, and it's not captured on this post, it just rests over it. Even with the movement of this in the slide, this leg of this spring cannot come off. I still think it's a rather weak design, in my opinion, but it is captured by the side of the slide right here where it indexes. Okay. Now we're going to break down the SCU, or examine the SCU. In order to fire this weapon, you've got to have, or the safety feature designed into it rather, according to Sig, you've got to have a rearward press of the trigger, which will cause the captive safety lever to rotate up and index your safety block and depress it to allow the striker to go forward. And your sear has to drop down and release the sear. Okay. If you look, your sear drops at the same time your captive safety lever is rotating upward. Okay. It kind of appears to me to happen all simultaneously. And one of my commenters commented in the last video that this pistol does have the upgrade, and he's correct. After going back and doing some more research into it and reviewing the armorer's course, this pistol did receive the upgrade from the factory before it was shipped out. So you got your slide cut out right here for this disconnector right here, and this has got the both the primary and the secondary sear surfaces. So what this is designed is, for some reason, if this loses engagement with the primary sear surface, your safety lock up here in your slide is supposed to keep it from firing, and this secondary sear notch is supposed to capture your hook of your striker in the event it loses contact with the primary sear. In the FBI's testing, they had to actually modify and grind part of this away to be able to test the engagement with the secondary sear surface, but it did work. Okay. This is your captive safety lever, disconnector, sear, trigger bar, trigger, your slide stop, slide release, and your takedown safety lever. Okay. What I found with this pistol, and I want to make a correction from my last video, this gun belongs to a firearms instructor and lieutenant at the department I work at, and he has, I forget the number I said in the last video, and I said it was a conservative estimate, but I spoke with him again and confirmed he actually has over 10,000 rounds through this gun. Okay, so it's been shot rather significantly. No, that's not the right way to do this. However, this particular gun, they've got the takedown safety lever pin swaged in place, so it's not coming out. And I don't want to risk damaging the fire control unit trying to make it come out. Nor do I have another one to replace it with, so I could get it out if I wanted, but I'd have to permanently alter it, which I don't want to do. I'm going to leave it in place so I can work around it. So here's your Sear housing. Here's your captive safety lever. Here's your Sear and your 2 Sear springs. And if you'll notice, in this particular gun, like I said, this gun has over 10,000 rounds and the Sear springs are bent up. When I first pulled it out of the gun for the first time, these were actually overlapped and intertwined together. Something very similar to that, okay? Now, Sear springs are retained on a post right up here on either side of the Sear. Just like that. And they ride right down here on the back. Try to get this so you guys can see it. They ride right down here on either side of the rear of the Sear housing. And there's a little ledge right here. Try to get some light in here. Hopefully you can see that. There's a little ledge right down in there they sit in on the very back of the Sear housing. One of the primary issues I have with this is the springs are not captured here at the bottom. And an improvement that I see that could be made to solve that issue is to have a stud on the bottom, just like the top, that positively captures the springs and keeps them in place. I believe that's something Sig should change in their design. It's awfully close to the roll pin that goes through the back right here that holds the Sear housing in place. But I do believe that one could upgrade this and get the measurements, drill a very tiny hole, roughly here and here on either side, and insert a very small screw in place. Grind the I'll file the threads off at the very end. It's where the tip of each one would rest inside the 2 Sears right here and positively capture them. If I had one of these guns, that's one thing I would absolutely do, just to make sure they're captured and are not able to come out of place or get crossed up and bent up like that one was. And I just dropped one of them. It doesn't really matter if I lose them. I got brand new ones here to replace them with. But on the MSP gun the FBI evaluated, they noticed a lot of substantial wear and a ledge between these different surfaces. This primary Sear surface on this one looks very nice. For a gun with over 10,000 rounds through it, looks great. Secondary Sear surface looks pretty good. And I don't see any abnormal signs of wear whatsoever. It's nice and crisp, nice and flat. The edge is nice and sharp. It looks to be in tip-top shape. Same thing with our actual striker right here. I don't see a ledge on this one. It's nice and flat, nice and crisp, and feels nice and smooth. I don't notice any abnormal wear. Okay. So, with that being said, you see how the gun functions now. See what the parts look like, and you see what the FBI found on that. I'm going to stop the video here. I'm going to come back and get all this back assembled, and then we're going to do some testing. Alright, I got this fire control unit put back together. And we're going to go over some of the things that I found. And go over some of the stuff from the FBI and what they did. Okay. First off, I want to caution you again. I'm not an expert on the Sig platform or Sig pistols altogether. I reviewed an armorer's course, and I went through this pistol and tried to examine it in the most objective way possible that I can. But I am no expert in these platforms at all. But I wanted to come into this and do this video. I wanted to get a hold of one for a while and do some testing and come up with my own thoughts and my own findings on this pistol because of all the controversy going on. As I'll be honest with you, when I was looking at the design of the gun on Sig's website, and I was looking at the safety features built into it, I'm like, I don't see how this gun can fire itself. But there's clearly been enough documented incidents that obviously there's a problem. I'm not saying there's not. And despite what you see in the testing that I'm going to show you, don't get fooled into thinking there's not a problem with these guns, okay? Because there's clearly a demonstrated issue with these firearms. I don't think it is specific to every single one of the firearms. I think it's a percentage, and we'll get into that a little bit more towards the end of the video here, but I wanted to kind of show you guys how this particular firearm works. I built a makeshift redneck armorer's plate because I don't have one for this pistol, and I wasn't going to wait on one to get here. This is your striker notch right here. You can see its engagement with the Sear right down there. That's the primary Sear notch. Right down there. You can see the engagement, and it has what I would describe as really good engagement. Okay. I'm not going to press the trigger. My finger is up here on the side of the slide or the side of the frame. Okay. Alright. Nothing. Okay. Again, fingers up here. Mimic it being in the holster. Nothing. Still have to pull the trigger. Okay. Go a little bit further. Spring stayed in place this time. That's great. Make reassembly easier. Okay. I'm going to take the striker block safety completely out. And for purposes of this test, I'm going to actually place the regular end plate back. Okay, so I've got the striker block safety and spring completely out of the gun. We're relying only on sear engagement. Okay, we'll reset it again. Didn't fail. Okay. Not fail. That's with absolutely no safety in place. We're relying only on the primary and secondary sear. Okay. And this is with two springs that are obviously out of spec and jacked up, supporting the sear. Now, put armorer's plate that I made back in place. Put our slide back on. Shake it to death. We're still in the primary sear notch. Bang the mag well. We're still in the primary sear notch. We're still engaged fully on the primary sear notch. Sear has not slipped whatsoever. Okay. Well, the spring stayed in place, which is great. We got our cactus safety lever. Correction, our actual safety lever. Alright, get it back in place. Well, try and hold it together. Okay. The little cups are always fun. I meant that jokingly, by the way. If you couldn't sense the sarcasm. There we go. Okay. Now I'll put our safety spring back in place. Short leg goes up. And then snap the long leg into its notch right there. Oh, did not quite get it. I need to move the striker back a little bit. There we go. Okay, so our striker block safety is now in place, and you see it's holding it back. Okay, put this back in here. And put our armorer's plate. In place. I'm putting a primed casing. Okay. And we'll grab one of these punches because they're smooth. Nice and smooth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to depress the primary sear notch. As you can see, the striker slipped past the primary and the secondary sear notch for the striker. Dropped off the primary, bypassed the secondary because I pushed it down far enough, and it's entirely captured on the safety lever. Okay. Reset everything. Again. Over and over and over again. Striker safety, striker block safety positively stops. So there's absolutely zero impressions from the striker on that prime case. Now, I've done this now probably at least 30 to 50 times. Just to rule out if there's any possibility it's caused by, oh no, I can't because I can't reach it. I got to do it with the armorer's plate in place. You see that little hook on that striker block safety is still just fine. Okay, so I'm not going to do it for the sake of length of time on this video, but I've done all kind of testing and all kind of different positions and everything, and I could not get this thing to fire, period. Again, I caution you, these are my results on this particular firearm. Don't think that it's going to be the same across every single one. More of that in a minute. Let's go back to the FBI's reports right here. So they tested the secondary sear notch, which is designed to catch the striker pin hook in the event it loses connection with the primary notch. In addition to other changes to the Sear, the secondary notch was added as part of Sig Sauer's voluntary upgrade program, where they upgraded from the drop safe ones, or the ones that were not drop safe rather. To test the secondary Sear notch, milling of the primary Sear notch was necessary. In order to avoid altering the fire control unit of the subject firearm, a spare fire control unit was utilized. The objective was to provide enough engagement between the striker pin hook and the primary Sear notch that connection would not be lost until intentionally induced. The inherent issue with changing the primary Sear engagement is the change in timing of the secondary Sear notch to catch the striker pin hook. Milling the primary Sear notch resulted in less vertical distance, but the secondary Sear notch had to travel, thereby increasing the possibility it catches the striker, but also reduced the spacing between the last point of primary Sear contact and the secondary Sear notch face, reducing the possibility it catches the striker. As such, the result of this supplemental test is limited to the modified test firearm and should not be applied to the subject weapon. However, the test does provide insight into the design and function of Sig Sauer's added safety feature. Once milling was complete, the subject FCU was removed and replaced with a fire control unit containing the altered Sear. Additionally, the modified rear slide cap was used to observe the Sear. All of the components belong to the subject weapon. Ballistic Research Facility conducted 10 tests of the secondary Sear in which the striker pin hook was placed on the 45-degree cut primary notch, right here, and released the striker by tapping the holstered firearm with a dead blow mallet. The secondary Sear successfully caught the striker pin hook on all 10 attempts. Striker safety lock. The striker safety lock is the only active safety preventing the striker from inadvertently striking the primer. It is the last safety with an opportunity to catch the striker should the primary notch lose engagement and the secondary notch be overridden. As such, additional testing related to the striker safety lock's design and function were conducted. Each test was conducted using the subject weapon and trimmed the rear slide cap. The weapon was placed into the subject holster and secured to a table. The holster's optic and slide covers were left in the open position to access the Sear as shown below. This is how they've done it. They secured this to a table and put the firearm in the holster. A prime case was placed into the chamber and a magazine loaded with dummy rounds was inserted. Thereafter, a punch was used to manually disengage the primary Sear notch from the striker pin hook to fire the prime case, just like I just did. Thereby testing the function of the striker safety lock. The procedure was conducted 100 times at both the primary and secondary Sear notch locations. After every 10 attempts, the prime case was inspected for primer indentation. Across all attempts at both locations, the prime case never fired, nor was there any indication the striker touched the primer. Therefore, the striker safety lock functioned as designed under these conditions. A second test with the striker at the primary Sear notch location was conducted to test the striker safety lock. The test involved tapping the holstered weapon on both the holster and weapon with a dead blow hammer 50 times at multiple locations. After every 50 taps, the Sear was manually disengaged and the prime case was inspected for contact by the striker. The locations were the holster right side, holster slide cover, holster back side top screw, front, bottom, and left side. The weapon was the rear slide cap, magazine foreplate, right side, left side, and the pistol grip. The striker safety lock successfully prevented the striker from contacting the prime case after each manual release of the Sear. No slip of the Sear engagement was observed during the strikes. However, the striker would shift laterally on the primary Sear surface approximately a 32nd of an inch. Because of the inherent movement between the sliding frame, a third test of the striker safety lock was conducted. Approximately 50 attempts were made to determine if the striker would impact the prime case after manipulating the weapon while holstered. The weapon was pressed together and pulled apart at the sliding frame. Thereafter, pressure was applied to the frame and the Sear manually. The pressure was applied to the frame manually, and the Sear was manually released from the primary notch. The intent of the manipulation and pressure was to mimic what might occur to a holstered weapon during an officer's duties, such as running, jumping, climbing, fighting, pressing a weapon against a wall or vehicle, or obtaining a master grip on the pistol prior to drawing, and etc. Staff observed the prime case fired on 9 attempts with the primer indent measuring between 0.019 to 0.026 inches with an average of 0.023. While staging one attempt to allow another staff member to observe the striker safety lock function as designed, the weapon was prepared and placed in the holster with no manipulation. A second staff member released the primary sear notch from the striker and the primed case fired, indicating failure of the striker safety lock. The primer indentation measured .018. BRF observed 6 instances where the primer did not fire, but a small indentation was present, indicating the striker had contacted the primer. These indicate indentions measured between .0005 to .001. The remaining attempts resulted in no firing of the prime case and no evidence that the striker had contacted the primer. Ultimately, in these instances, the striker safety lock functioned as designed. A brand new unfired Sig Sauer M18 pistol was obtained from Michigan State Police to determine if the test could be repeated on another weapon. On the first attempt, the striker safety lock successfully prevented the striker from impacting the prime case. However, on the second attempt, the prime case fired, indicating the striker safety lock failed to stop the striker's forward movement. The primer indent measured .023. The FBI's conclusion: according to Sig Sauer, 5 independent actions must occur before the P320 will discharge. These actions are: trigger is pressed to the rear, moving the trigger bar forward. Captive safety lever rotates upward. Striker safety lock rotates upward. Sear rotates downward, and striker pin is released. Should the striker and primary sear notch lose engagement, there are 2 safeties designed to prevent the weapon from firing. These are the secondary sear notch and the striker safety lock. A reliable test could not be developed at the time of this document to test the effectiveness of the secondary sear notch. However, testing did indicate with movements representing those common to a law enforcement officer, it is possible to render the striker safety lock inoperable and ineffective at preventing the striker from impacting a chambered round if complete sear engagement is lost. It is important to note that the striker safety lock, by design, is the last safety in line to prevent an unintended discharge, as it is in place to protect against a secondary sear notch override. While examination of the subject weapon did not independently provide evidence of an uncommanded discharge, it does indicate that it may be possible if sear engagement is lost. The disabling of the striker safety lock through movement and friction creates a condition which merits further exploration to fully assess potential risk. BRF recommends that MSP weigh the content of this report with the outcome of the internal investigation in making its final determination related to the Sig Sauer M18 as an issued firearm within the department. Okay. They had to go through a whole lot of stuff to make this gun fire, or make one of these weapons fire, without a trigger pull. You've seen the testing I've just done. Do I feel like this particular weapon is safe? Yes, I do. If I turn this the right way, it might work, wouldn't it? There we go. I absolutely, without a question, believe this weapon is safe. And without a question, I absolutely would carry this weapon around in the chamber without fear that it's going to go off. This one. Now's where the video is going to take a turn and get interesting. Here's my evaluation. I actually wanted to come into this with an open mind, and I wanted to get my hands on one of these pistols for a long time to look at the internals, do some testing on my own before I made up my mind one way or the other whether it was an issue with the Sig weapons, the P320 series of weapons, the P320, the M17 and M18, or if there's a bunch of issues with handling of these firearms that's causing all these uncommanded discharges. And for a long time I was like, yeah, it's probably an issue with the people. However, enough evidence and videos have come out now that show that without a doubt these guns are going off without a trigger pull. No question. It's clearly demonstrated numerous times. You can also research all the stuff online about these videos, I mean, these pistols and the videos and stuff associated with them. And there's clearly an issue. Now, I want to read to you a statement Sig Sauer put out back in, I think it was March. If you want to read this for yourself, you can go to sigsauer.com/P320-truth or type in P320truth.com. Sig Sauer issued a statement March the 7th, 2025. The P320 cannot, under any circumstances, discharge without a trigger pull. That is a fact. The allegations against the P320 are nothing more than individuals seeking to profit or avoid personal responsibility. Recently, anti-gun groups, members of the mainstream media, trial attorneys, and other uninformed and agenda-driven parties have launched attacks on one of Sig Sauer's most trusted, most tested, and most popular products, the P320 pistol. In all cases, these individuals have an ulterior motive behind their baseless allegations that the P320 can fire without a trigger pull. They have no evidence, no data, and no empirical testing to support any of their claims. They instead choose to misrepresent clear, negligent discharges as a design problem. In the decades since its introduction, the P320 has undergone the most rigorous testing and evaluation of any firearm by military and law enforcement agencies across the world. Around the world. I want to read this accurately. It consistently delivers a proven record of performance and reliability through state-of-the-art engineering and documented quality control at every stage of its production. Claims that unintended discharges are anything more than negligent handling and or manufactured lies to support an anti-gun, anti-SIG agenda are false. Furthermore, lawsuits claiming that the P320 is capable of firing without the trigger being pulled have been dismissed in courtrooms around the country. In addition, multiple plaintiffs, so-called experts, have conceded it is not possible for the P320 to discharge unless the trigger is fully actuated. The rhetoric is high, and we can no longer stay silent while lawsuits run their course. And clickbait farming, engagement hacking, grifters continue their campaign to hijack the truth for profit. Enough is enough. From the courts of law to the court of public opinion, we will combat the lies and misinformation with the truth. Sig Sauer stands behind the quality, safety, and design of all our products, especially the P320. Industry, take notice. What's happening today to Sig Sauer with the anti-gun mob and their lawfare tactics will happen tomorrow at another firearms manufacturer and then another. Today, for Sig Sauer, it ends. And that's their official statement. Again, March 7th, 2025. I read that statement, and I'm like, well, Sig certainly has decided that this is the hill they're going to die on, in my opinion. And they are completely adamant that this gun cannot fire by a trigger pull. So I want to get a hold of one for myself before I made any determinations of what I thought, and I wanted to be able to test and evaluate one to get first-hand knowledge and experience before I decided whether I thought there was an issue with them or I thought there wasn't, and maybe it's user negligence. Well, let's face it, law enforcement officers, not all, but a number of law enforcement officers, a number of military, and a number of everyday consumers all are negligent with firearms and mishandle them at times. I've seen it, you've seen it, it happens. A lot of guys and girls coming into law enforcement these days have no experience and no knowledge of firearms. First time they fire a weapon is when they're doing the firearms portion of the training at the academy. They've never fired a weapon before, don't know how to use one. So there's a lot of room for issues across the board with different people. That being said, that statement rubbed me raw when Sig put it out. A lot of the biggest critics of the P320 series of pistols are people in the Pro 2A community. They are not agenda driven against Sig. One such person in particular owns personally several Sig pistols that he has always liked. I've never been a Sig person. I've never been an anti-Sig person. This is my first experience with a P320 pistol. First time being able to evaluate one. I've shot it a couple of times in the past, but I've come close to buying a P365 myself. I've got nothing against Sig as a company up until now. And as of earlier this week, I actually planned to buy a Sig P320 pistol, and I was going to buy a bunch of extra parts for it, and I was going to conduct quite a bit of testing and modification and see if I could figure out a way to combat this issue. Until last week, after we have an airman killed by one of these pistols discharged in a holster, the Washington Training and Standards Commission for law enforcement agencies and officers across the state of Washington issued a ban notice banning the use of any 3P20 series of pistols at any of its facilities in the state of Washington, citing ongoing safety issues with this platform. And they did that not because they're anti-Sig, but they did that because they're trying to protect the safety of all the people at their ranges, which is entirely reasonable in my opinion. And Sig's response was to sue the Washington State Education and Training Commission for law enforcement. That rubbed me raw really bad, and it's kind of cemented for me that I will never spend a dime on a Sig product until they make this right. There is clearly an issue with these pistols, and suing a law enforcement training commission who is trying to protect the safety of its people on its range because you've got a defective product, it's not the right move to take. Apparently Sig has decided this is the hill they're going to die on, and they're going to litigate everyone to death until they can't no more. And that really pissed me off. Should piss off every Sig owner. This statement here back on March 27th, or March 7th rather, was enough. You know, if you got a problem with Sig pistols, apparently they think you're just anti-Sig, you're lying, and see how else they worded in here. You're anti-gun, you're clickbait farming, or you're an engagement hacking grifter trying to hijack the truth for profit. Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm not making a dime off of this. I'm not making a penny off of this. Either way or the other. My channel's not monetized. I don't get any endorsements or anything from anyone or any corporation or company. In fact, I gunsmith as a hobby. I'm a certified Department of Armor for my department for a Glock pistol, AR-15, Remington 870, and the Remington 700 weapon platforms. I don't get paid anything extra for that either. In fact, a lot of the firearms I fix for the department, I do on my own time. I'm not even on the clock when I do it. So I'm not getting paid anything for my opinions on this platform pistol. And I could really care less what Sig thinks about it or what they call me. But between this statement and them suing Washington State Training Commission, I'm not going to even invest in one of these pistols for testing. I don't like it anyway. Got nothing against Sig as a company until the way they've handled this situation, but I don't like how loose this slide to frame fit is. I don't like the fact that as I start to pull the trigger, my barrel dips forward and the rear of my slide comes up like on a fulcrum. And as I fire, it goes back. I don't like that. I believe if High Point were to start making 1911 pistols, their slide to frame fit will be better than this. And that's saying a lot. This is a very sloppy fitting gun. I don't like it. Do I believe this particular firearm I'm holding in my hands right now is 100% safe? Yes, I do. Even with the Sear springs messed up in it. I have tried to reach in there and pull them out of place and make the Sear fail, and I cannot. And that's kind of a lot to try to get into on video, but I have tried my best to make this thing fail absent from having it mounted in a holster. And conducting hundreds of tests as the FBI did with different pressure points. But I have actually taken this pistol with the armor plate on the back. I have squeezed the slide together like this and pressed in there, released the primary Sear engagement. I pulled the slide apart, I moved it back, I moved it forward, done everything I could think of, and I just don't have, there's not enough time to do a video long enough to go through all of that, but it would take hours. But I have done everything I can to make this particular weapon not fire. Or to get it to fire without a trigger pull. I cannot do it. With that being said, do I believe there's an issue with these pistols? I absolutely do. And I do not recommend them, and here's why. We've already mentioned the slide to frame fit. It's mighty loose, okay? Pay attention to this. As I squeeze the trigger, the captive safety lever moves at the same time as your Sear drops out of place to release your striker. So as your Sear is dropping to release the striker, your captive safety lever is moving up. Well, watch what happens when I manually depress the Sear and I don't press the trigger. And to show you this, my hands are nowhere near the trigger. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers on the grip, okay? Watch what happens to the captive safety lever when I rotate the Sear down manually. Okay, you see that? It is still coming up. The disconnector's jumping. You see this, the disconnector also moves somewhat as you pull the trigger. Okay. Again, all 5 fingers. You see that? That safety lever rotates upward. It moves at the same time as the Sear. Well, if it moves at the same time as the Sear, either with a trigger pull and both without a trigger pull and with a trigger pull, how is it rendering the firearm safe? This is designed, striker safety right here is designed to stop the striker from going forward unless the trigger is pulled. But yet, even with the trigger not being pulled, this is rotating upward and back where it could possibly depress your striker safety without a trigger pull. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think is happening. And do I think it's an issue with this particular gun? No. This is also not a regular P320. This is the X5 series, which is built a little bit better. Sig Sauer manufactures these parts out of MIM parts, machine injection molded metal. Now, they are not the only firearms manufacturer to use MIM parts. I think there's some MIM parts in Glocks. And most firearms that's manufactured today, in fact, Smith & Wesson revolvers, post 97, most of the internal action components are made out of MIM parts. Okay? Some MIM parts are better than others. I think, let's try to show this. When I pull the trigger, notice how high up the captive safety lever moves. It moves up to almost that line on the side disconnector, which the disconnector moves up as well. But it reaches almost that line on the side disconnector right there. Okay? I hope you can see that. Alright. Take my finger out of play and I'm going to manipulate the Sear downward. Look how high it comes up. It's still almost to that line on the disconnector. Almost. Not quite, but almost. Just about as far as with a trigger pull. Coupled with how easy it is to manipulate this striker safety. I do believe the issue with these firearms is an issue between the dimensions of the parts. I think it's an actual part issue where the components that make up all the parts in here are getting out of spec. Maybe it's quality control issue, manufacturing issue, I don't know. As you noticed, I went through this entire pistol. I showed you every surface is like awesome. The shape of it, the sear, primary sear, secondary sear, the striker face, the safety lever, everything's in very good shape and condition. And this pistol is well used, over 10,000 rounds. The pistol had approximately 1,300 rounds from it that the FBI evaluated, and their report had only around 1,300 rounds through it. And there was considerable wear and ledges built up on the surfaces of the striker face, and considerable wear on the sear. I think the issue is a combination of lack of quality control on the parts and the looseness of your slide to frame fit. Again, notice how much this moves. This slide moves quite a bit, okay? With it in a holster and this slide rattling around as you're moving around in the holster, if you've got some parts that the dimensions are off just a little bit, if that sear slips, it absolutely could engage that striker safety lever, because when the sear moves, again, when the sear moves downward, there's no other choice the way this is designed with a trigger bar but for the captive safety lever to rotate upward. If the dimensions on this is off a little bit, and or there's a slightly weaker spring right here, and your striker block safety, or there's some dimensional issues between here coupled with the slide movement, I absolutely believe that if sear engagement is lost, this could disengage that striker safety lock, causing an uncommanded discharge without a trigger pull. Okay? I pressed the sear. Look how much movement there is in your trigger. Me pressing the sear. The trigger bar is connected to everything back here, and it all operates at the same time. According to the armorer's manual, the armorer's course I did rather, or I reviewed, just changing the trigger from a regular curved trigger to a flat trigger decreases the amount of trigger pull force needed by, I can't remember the percentages, but it was like between which trigger you use, it's 15 and I think 30% reduction in trigger pull force needed. Okay. I think Sig needs to go back and redesign this and upgrade it. Your captive safety lever should operate independently of your sear. Your sear springs should be a little more robust than what they are, and they should be captured positively at both the top and the bottom so they cannot slip. The striker safety and spring need to be upgraded to a much stronger spring, where there's not, this can't be pressed so easily. I mean, there's nothing to press that. Okay. I believe there is an issue with some of these pistols, and some there are not. I have absolute confidence in the safety of this pistol, and I do not believe this pistol will fire without the trigger being pulled, even pulled significantly, because I have actually held this down to right before it breaks, and I've tapped it with a hammer. I shook it, everything. I cannot get it to fire without a full trigger pull, okay, or at least to the point where you lose sear engagement. Do I believe that all of them are safe? Absolutely not. It's clearly demonstrated there's an issue, and I believe this is what the issue is. I think it's a combination of parts and the way it's designed, where everything moves together. And I believe Sig Sauer should retrofit this to where your captive safety lever cannot move along with your sear. It has to move independently. Now, there are some guys doing some modifications, and I haven't even looked into them that deeply. I've just seen some few minutes here and there. I think Wyoming Gun Project might have been one of the channels doing a modification of it, which I think is quite unsafe. And I believe his modification to the Sear could actually render this again to be not drop safe. So only time will tell on that, but this is what issue I have found. And I believe, like I said, there's only a small percentage of the overall number of P320s in service and in circulation. There's only a small percentage of them that's having problems. However, it's too great a percentage for Sig not to address it and make it right. I don't know if Sig even knows how to. And I don't want to hate on Sig, because honestly I'm impressed with this pistol in some areas and very seriously underimpressed in others. Man, I love this frame or this grip module. It is amazing. It is rigid. It is rigid. It is tough. It is strong. It's got, I believe, a tungsten insert in it. It does not flex like a Glock pistol. Look how the trigger guard is undercut unlike a Glock pistol, man. It just feels so nice gripping this thing in your hand. And I really wanted to like this pistol, but I don't. Nah, I love the grip frame or grip module. I like the modularity of the platform. You can take this fire control unit out and you can put it in a smaller grip frame. You put it in a smaller sliding barrel. It's very nice, very well thought out as far as that goes. If Sig could fix this and this and improve their quality control, I think they could come out on top. Go ahead and make the changes, recall the pistols, and you'd be okay. But calling out people and trash talking them the way they did in that March 7th statement and trying to litigate everybody who has an issue with this platform of pistol is not the correct answer. It's not how you treat your customers. And it's starting to bite them in the butt now. A lot of large agencies and departments of the government are dropping the Sig Sauer P320 series of pistols like it's hot. And Sig don't get ahead of this and make the corrections that need to be made. It's not going to go over very well for them. And they got a chance to come back from this with their head held high and their company's still intact. But I do believe if they keep going down the road they're going, it's not going to turn out very well for them in the end, and they're probably going to lose the majority of law enforcement, military and government support, and their business is probably financially going to go under or take a very serious hit. Let's hope they change their minds and do the right thing. Don't know that they will, but until Sig changes their perspective, they address the issues that I see in this pistol and get them to where they are safe, I cannot recommend these pistols, and I cannot recommend you carrying one with a round in the chamber. And if I can't carry a firearm and be confident in its safety with a round in the chamber, I'm not carrying it, because I'm not trusting my life to having to have time to rack around from the magazine into the chamber before I engage a threat. So with that being said, I do not recommend these. I do not recommend buying one. If you have one, I don't recommend selling it, because it may be getting placed in the hands of someone else who is not as knowledgeable or is not as confident in firearms, and it could be putting them in a very dangerous situation. I would recommend holding on to them and seeing if a fix comes out in the near future. Again, I wanted to buy one and work on trying to develop a way to get around it, but I probably wouldn't be able to without having some machinery equipment I don't have yet, and I just cannot in good conscience spend the money on trying to do it after the way Sig has responded, especially with the lawsuit against Washington State Training Academy or State Training Commission this past week. I won't support their products at all. Hope you found this informative. Hope this helps you make up your mind about the P320 pistol. Again, I thank you for watching. I want to thank all the viewers who commented in the last video and give their thoughts. And I hope I've addressed all of those. I've got one more I need to address I just thought about, but as a matter of fact. One of the users commented about the actual holsters. If there's anything molded into the holsters that could be impacting the trigger. And I don't have a way of affording all the different holsters that's being used. You got Firearm, Alien Gear. I'm pretty sure Black Hawk makes some different duty holsters for this firearm, as well as some other companies. And I don't have a way of actually checking all of them, but I do have some experience with Firearm holsters and Black Hawk and some others for the Glock series of pistols. And I can tell you there's never anything in one of those holsters that can impact the trigger. If you notice, the trigger is entirely contained within the trigger guard. This trigger guard has to have a molded space to where this can slip down into the holster. If there's something that's going to impact this trigger and pull the trigger in the holster, it's going to catch on this trigger guard and not allow you to chamber, or correction, to holster the weapon. So I do not think holsters are the issue at all. It's possible a foreign object in the holster could become a problem. But there again, it would have to have clearance for it to fall in and get stopped right here in the trigger guard and be able to manipulate the trigger. It's a right good amount of movement right there for that to occur in a lot of space. I just don't see that happening. I don't think holsters are the issue. I think it's in the gun. But again, thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you in making your own determination and your own decisions about this pistol and this platform. And if you've got any thoughts or comments, please leave them below. Please share this video if you know anybody that owns a 320 series of pistols. Share the video with them so they can become educated, hopefully. And thank you for watching the channel. Y'all have a great day.